in my own experience, I'm in a group that we're probably getting 75-80% success rate, but we're promoting the God of their understanding. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a really good question, Carl. Yeah, last week in episode 1, we talked about where that comes out of the book and forward to the second edition and what what brought that on. But yeah, and I think that no, I kind of disagree with the preface that it's about a stronger, more people believed in God. I think that since then, since 1955, when that statistic came out, to today, I think people have just gotten further and further away from the actual directions in the big book. And they've gotten too many different forms. A lot of people come into recovery, they get a sponsor, they go through the steps, they get sober, and all of a sudden they think that they could better something. If it worked good for you and you're sober, why do you want to try to better it? That's kind of what we've been doing our whole life, is making things better, and then in the process we mess stuff up. So I think that the seriousness of the program of recovery has been diluted, rather than did they believe more in God back then than they do today. I think if somebody is a believer today, they're just as much a believer as somebody back then. Yes, there may be less believers today because there's more evil choices to get us addicted to different things, but it all boils down to how serious they practice the program of recovery. Does that make sense? What do you guys think, Jerry and Janine? What do you think about what he asked?
Go ahead.
That's a good question. So are you asking if there was more God before, or the concept of God has changed over the years from what Bill and Bob, when they first put the book of Alcoholics Anonymous together? Is that what your question is, Carl?
Yeah, they were more fixed with the Christian God, the God that they found in the Bible, because that's the book they were studying before we had this book. So do you think those of us who and I'm happy to have that as my God as well. The people who go along that road, understanding or not understanding it, are more successful in sobriety. Maybe you guys who have I came and stayed like Danny. Maybe those of you who've been in and out, was there a big change in your belief in your higher power that made you more committed to this way of life?
Well, I think that, just even the way the steps are written, God as you understand him. So I think that Bill and Bob are trying to make it as inclusive as possible. And even if that with having a Christian background or whatever might be their belief, I know that throughout some of the literature we read about Bill Wilson really doing a lot of discovery too, and his concept of God, I think, evolved a lot through his recovery and searching too. And I think that the literature really continues to say that we need to keep expanding our spiritual life and continuing to grow, and so not just being fixed on one. We can have the concept, I believe, of God. Everybody, like, whatever the thought is, but maybe like to continue to grow that relationship just like you would with another person as well. What do you think, Jerry?
I know my own experience, being brought up and forced into organized religion, I didn't like it. So in my path of destruction with 30 years of drinking and causing mayhem, I was running away from any type of God. And when I got serious about wanting to change my life and got tired of living like that and got more educated and reading the book and hearing people, I couldn't deny that I needed to enlarge my spiritual life. I couldn't deny that I was spiritually dead. So I started seeking, and I started doing what you guys were doing. And wow, today I live a spiritual life. And, you know, I don't have to debate about Jesus or the Bible or any of that. But, you know, when I read in the big book and it talks about the guys that had years of sobriety and then they drank again and then they were dead within a couple of years, it said failed to enlarge your spiritual life. So that scared me. So it's kept me sober for this long now. So now with having this conception of a God of my own understanding, it gets more exciting, and it gets it just keeps improving, and I really like this way of spiritual life, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And thank you guys. It's good answers, good question. And it's funny that you asked that question, because we encourage people to send in their questions through the chats, and there's other ways to put your questions in. If we don't get to them, we'll hold them and try to get to them the next week. And we have 2 questions today that are right on that topic. One of them is, can you recover without believing in God? And the other one is, how am I supposed to believe in a God or a higher power? 2 good questions. Let's look at the first one. Can you recover without believing in God? 100% absolutely you can. Because when I got here, I did not, you know, I grew up as a Roman Catholic, so I had a knowledge of a God in my life, but I was so separated from that, you know, my dad was God, and when he died, I spent the rest of my life trying to be God myself. And then when I got recovery, you know, I didn't get sober to find God. So I got sober using the group as my higher power, which the book says we can, you know. So yes, the answer to that question, can you recover without believing in God? Absolutely you can. Now, there's an unasked question that should go with that. Can you grow spiritually? Can you grow spiritually and continue to grow spiritually in the program without God? I think the answer to that is absolutely no. I think you need a higher power. I don't think you need, the book says you have to have one. And so, yes, you can get sober without God, but you need God. You need a higher power to continuously grow spiritually and stay in this program. So that's one question. The other question was, how am I supposed to believe in a God or a higher power? Now, this is something that we can all probably talk about for an hour, but you know, to make it quick, and then I'll turn it over to you guys. How am I supposed to believe in a God or a higher power? Well, first thing is look at what we all believe in, something, even though we may not consciously think it's a higher power. But if you remove God from the equation, you replace it. You don't have a void. You don't have a freedom. You have a void, and that void gets filled by something, whatever that something may be. That something may be alcohol and drugs, or gambling, or sex, or whatever. You know, you're going to fill that void with something, and that is your higher power. And something takes the seat that you kick God out of, and so the question then is to take a look at where you're at now and how your life's been going. If your life's been going so great, you probably wouldn't have had to join AA or CA or anything like that. So how am I supposed to believe in God or a higher power? Just look at where you're at and realize that there's a better way. And if you can tap into that power, then you're unlimited. You know, in our literature, it talks about we believe in an infinite God rather than our finite self. And what that means is that we as human beings, there's a cap on what we're able to be and do. It can be measured. There's a beginning and an end. We're finite. And people like us always exceed the boundaries of our finite selves. But if we tap into the power of God, God is infinite. There's no beginning and end, can't be measured. So therefore, and we tap into the power of God, we can do things that we can never do on our own. So that's the answer. My answer to that. I'll turn it over to Jerry and Janine and see if they got something they want to share about that.
I think one of the things that's helped me with growing my faith is coming into the rooms Alcoholics Anonymous and seeing the miracles happening in people's life. And it's just unbelievable, especially when you see a newcomer come in that looks so hopeless and really unhealthy, right? Emotionally, mentally, physically. And then they kind of start to grab onto this program. They're being mentored through sponsorship. They start working the steps. They start taking care of themselves, getting nutrition and rest and all the things. And you start to see what we kind of call like the light bulbs come on. And you start hearing, they got their driver's license back. They got restored with some family members. They're going back to college. They got a job that they're enjoying, and they're starting to be productive members of society. And it's like, wow, how did that person get from here to there? And, I've experienced that in my own life too. Like, how did you get from here to there? Then it's, something that is outside of my own or in some of the individual's own power. You can see something bigger working in their lives, and whether, whatever you want to call that, the divine spirit of the universe or God, but just by ourselves being able to accomplish things that we never would have been able to do on our own.
Good answer. Jerry, you want to throw something in there?
I'll throw something in there. Can you recover without God or spirituality? Like you said, yes, you can, by using like you said, that's exactly what I did. That group, the AA group, was my higher power. They were staying sober. I couldn't. It was attractive. I wanted what they had. As I ventured through this and saw in the book where it said we were beyond human aid. There was no modern medicine, no doctor, the judge, the police, nobody could keep me sober. It had to come from a power greater than myself, and that power must be God in my understanding. So, the little bit of hope and faith that I had to seek, I had to follow some directions. I wasn't good at following directions. AA gave me some good suggestions. Get on my knees and ask God to direct my thoughts and my action and help me stay sober for the day. And then at night, thank him. And so it's kind of a process for me, and it's grown. And I do, like you said, can you get sober without that? Yeah. Can you stay sober and grow spiritually? No, I don't think so. So, wow, if I would have known that a spiritual life was going to be so good a long time ago, I would have done it. But when you're young, you think you know everything, and when you mix drugs and alcohol with it, you're selfish and self-centered, and it's just hard to. I'm just super lucky that I got here by seconds and inches, and man, I'm grateful that today God's working in my life. I live a spiritual life. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
All right. Hey, Jeff, do you want to jump in and throw your 2 cents in there?
Sure. Yeah, you bet. I always think about, like, when I was a kid, I went to church camp. I grew up, like, my family was Methodist. I didn't go to church with them, but I went to Baptist church because I loved it. And I went to Nichols Hills Baptist Church, which is in Oklahoma City on May and Grand. And it's torn down now, but I loved it, and I loved Jesus, and I loved God as a kid. And then we would go to church camp at Falls Creek, which is a camp in the southern part of Oklahoma. But when we got there, we would go down there and we'd get high and we'd get drunk and we'd, mess around with girls. And then that evening, we'd all have a big get together and we would get saved. And I'd be like, hallelujah, I'm saved. My sins are forgiven, so I can start all over again. And we do it all again, the same thing the next day. So that was my concept of God, back then. And I really didn't, I mean, I'm just a dumb musician, so I didn't really follow along or care about God or religion or anything like that. What AA brought to me is a spiritual enlightenment. So now, I have a God, a higher power that is, guides me, and that I can, I finally learned, and Jerry says this all the time. It's like, I don't know what God's will is, but I'm pretty sure I know what it's not, So now, I just, the only prayer I ever say is that I can just do God's will. And I don't know what that is, but I just ask God for courage and the strength to do his will, whatever that may be, And so I found that by surrendering and doing that, it's taken away, a lot of troubles. It's a weird paradox that by surrendering, your life gets so much easier. I guess they can compare it to, like, you think of a palm tree, in a hurricane. The palm tree is not stiff and rigid; it bends, and goes with the wind. So that's something that I've learned from the program. And then I call, I'm not going to get real religious, but I call Jesus the gateway drug to God for me. So he was the example that, God put on this earth for us to give us direction on what to do. So, I try to just use that to guide my life, and that would never have happened if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous. So
cool.
So,
Jerry mentioned something. He said, he wanted what they had in the meeting, people in the meetings, and I can honestly look at you guys and tell you, when I got here, I didn't see anybody in the rooms that had anything that I wanted. I really didn't. There was nobody had anything that I wanted when I got sober. But I did come to terms with this fact, which saved my life. I didn't want what I had anymore. I didn't want what you guys had, but I certainly didn't want what I had. Now, years ago, I want to say 30 years ago or more, I went to Scotland and I spoke at the first, there was really even just one meeting of Cocaine Anonymous in Scotland at that time. And I did a 3-day big book study. And today, there's over 200 meetings of Cocaine Anonymous in Scotland. And it's pretty cool. So let's bring Carl back on and see what they think about the God thing in Scotland.
Well, it's different. I think it's a great subject. I really enjoyed what you all said. And in my own journey, it's peaked and it's gone down, and it's been this, it's been that. It's changed, It's in the last couple of years, I've picked the Bible up. I read the Bible in my first year, and then something pretty traumatic happened in my life. So that's something I've not touched for 30 years. So I need to improve. I need to grow. So that's why my nose has been in that book. In Scotland, there's a lot of pressure. There's the religious divide, Protestant and Catholics, and there's a lot of pressure being put on people growing up, through religion. I'm not a fan of religion personally. My God is very different to that. I think separating God from religion has helped me. There's been times when it's just been, it's working for the guys in the group, so there's something there. Maybe if I keep persevering, it's going to work for me as well. One of the lines in our book, in the chapter to wives, it says we are spiritually deficient, and I feel like that speaks volumes. You touched on it last week, Danny. People saying the threefold illness. It makes me feel nauseous when I hear that. It's mental, it's physical, and the spiritual is the solution to that. I'm not spiritually sick. You touched on the resentment is that, but I'm spiritually deficient. And so I've worked with people who've gone back to the church, and it's worked wonders for them. It's tells in our book to do that if that's our thing. It also suggests in our book to speak to rabbis, ministers, and priests about other literature. Well, if I go and speak to a minister, there's probably only one book he's going to suggest I read. But we've evolved. There's a lot more out there. So I'm interested in how others understand God and what that means to them. Sometimes it's just as basic as being being the good in my mind. You know, I'm aware of the bad and the evil. So when I came and sat with you guys, there is good. You know, anybody who comes into any of the meetings has probably knelt in a prison cell and said, God, if you're there, get me out of this. You're praying to the unknown. So for us here today, if you've made those prayers, they've been answered because we're here today. I don't need to. I don't need to understand God. I'm more comfortable just knowing there's something there that maybe cares for me more than I care for myself sometimes. And you guys, and then through this program, just how it gets me to that position where I can, look, I can just pause and look at the option. Right, I want to go out. Somebody's put something in my bin or somebody's parked in my space. I want to go out and the rage is there. But what's the alternative? You know, just sit back and maybe just pause. You talked about, you know, minutes and seconds. You know, seconds are just pausing. That's it, really. I don't want to see my big ugly face on the screen. I don't want to get the other people back.
What we have to remember. Thank you, all you guys. What we have to remember is that there's always 3 answers to prayer: yes, no, and wait. And no is definitely an answer. Jeff, you said we got a bunch of people in the waiting room there?
Yeah, there's looks like we have Hunter, Andy, Kyle, and Suresh.
Oh, okay.
If you want to talk to any of these people.
Does any of them have a question they want to get on and ask?
No.
No?
It looked like Kyle was going to say something. He unmuted for a second.
Kyle, you got a question you want to ask us?
Hey, we must have scared him off.
That's what happened last week.
Yeah, I guess so.
Suresh, you got a question, Suresh?
I got a bad connection, but it's great to be here.
Good to have you here.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You have a bad connection with the podcast, or you have a bad connection with God? Which one are you talking about?
That's great. Yeah, that's funny, but it's true.
I know that's why I said that to you.
I kind of hearken back to the Big Book where Bill W. really makes it explicit that he never had a problem believing in God. So when he sees Ebby in his apartment, you know, he does clarify, look, my problem is not that I didn't believe in God. I just couldn't get my arms around the idea that God cares about me, little old me. And that's where he was blocked from God. His concept of God is that, you know, okay, I believe in God, but I would just say, and then I'd leave it at that, is that, you know, my struggle in the Department of God is having faith in God. It's not really an intellectual or cultural belief in God, or even the universality of belief in God. You might even guess, you know, my parents were born as subjects of the British. And so that's a society that is robust in religious belief. But just in my relationship with God, you know, I have not been a faithful person. And I think I would make that pretty clear. My struggle is not coming to believe, but actually turning will over to, you know, a God outside of myself. And that's been my struggle. So that's what I would say.
Cool. You know, the idea that there is a God, and if you believe that there is a God, then it's up to you to, and that's what our literature and our book ask us to do later in the program, is to improve that relationship and have a better understanding of God. But what you said was important. You said that you have trouble with faith in God. Is there a reason that I'm on here by myself? I'd rather see you guys. Yeah. And here's the thing with that. Our literature is set up for you not to come in here and have faith. Our literature is set up for you to come in here and first come to believe. because you cannot have faith in something you don't believe in. So therefore, you must first come to believe, and then, so believing is hope. Faith is knowing. And so that's important, because I can't have faith in something that I don't believe in. So I first have hope that this will work, or that'll work, or this, whatever I'm doing in life. And then once that I start doing things and I start getting good results, that eventually turns into faith. I know if I do this, this is what's going to happen. And that's why if you're having trouble with faith in God, it's because you're skipping the part where you first come to believe. And I see that Kyle got his thing back on.
Yeah. Andy's got a question. Andy has something he'd like to say.
Andy, okay. Hello, Andy. You're on mute.
Yeah, you're muted.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
How you doing?
I was going to say that on as far as on how do you believe in a God or a higher power or whatever, I kind of just went off. I did want what you guys had, and I kept it simple. Whereas if you want to get sober, you got to do what the sober people are doing. So I just essentially worked the steps, and then like you were just kind of saying on the 4th step, I did my 4th step and my 5th step, and my whole life I was an insomniac. I never slept. And literally that night after my 5th step, I slept 7 hours, for the first time in my life. And I couldn't argue with those results. And it was like you were saying, when you start doing what the sober people are doing, you start getting the results. And something as irrefutable as being able to sleep for 7 hours straight, I could not argue that was anything to do with me. There was nothing I could have done to do that. And it's just little instances like that. And then you just follow the directions in the book. It gives you these either ors, and it said God is either everything or he's nothing. And, you just keep peeling back the onion, like they say, and it gets easier and easier to see God working in every aspect of your life. And like Suresh was just saying, I had no reason to believe that God would ever look on a little old me and work in my life. And I could just see everywhere that he was. There was no coincidences anymore. I just chose to believe that was God working in my life, no matter what the situation was. So that's what really helped me. And now, I just keep it simple, follow the directions in the book. That's it.
Cool. Very cool. It's good to have you here, Andy. Jerry, Janine, you got anything you want to jump in there with?
Well, I really like what Andy shared too, because, I'm thinking about the newcomer, right? Somebody who's coming into their very first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, or, trying to see about getting sober. And then, then there's a God concept, and there, and instead of trying to jump straight into the God concept, maybe, just, one step and then just going through the steps. And I hear Andy saying, and then as he was doing his 4th and 5th step, things were really starting to change in his life. And Danny, even, you were talking about, you have to come to believe, step 2, but not overwhelming someone on their very first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, here you go. Now you do this, and you're, and have a really big God, and you can stay sober. What do you think about that, Danny?
Well, when you ask the question, like Andy just said, is God everything or is he nothing? If you went around the room and asked everybody in the rooms, and I don't care if there's 50 people or 500 people in the room, almost every last person is going to say God's everything. And when people say that to me, then I follow it up with, then why don't you act that way? If you really think God is everything, why don't you act that way? Let's not forget that the chapter to we agnostics, the word agnostic itself, the root origin of the word comes from 2 Latin words that mean lack, and gnostic, knowledge. So what the chapter is really saying is we lack knowledge, and we're talking about God. And so we lack the knowledge of God. And so if if you didn't lack the knowledge of God. Now I'm sober, coming up on 35 years. I still don't understand God. I don't understand God, but I have an understanding of God that works well in my life. And that's what each of us need to have, is their personal understanding. And they need to have a personal relationship with God, a personal relationship, not a generic, God is love, God is everything. God, that's a bunch of bullshit. You know, that's just what you've always heard and what you know you should say. But we're talking about the importance of Alcoholics Anonymous program is to have a personal relationship with a God. That's what I say about that. Jeff, who else do we have in there? Kyle, did you have a question you want to jump in with? How you doing, pal? Good to see you.
Doing good. Not really a question. Very good information from everybody. I kind of love what Carl said and Andy, but my understanding of God as I see him is my spiritual connection over a religion in particular. I grew up with a lot of that breathed down my throat from different beliefs, different patterns, and never really developed that true connection until I started to find my recovery. And through my recovery found that it wasn't God as had been preached to me, or God as everybody had said, oh, he's your, like you said, Danny, he's love, he's this, he's that, he's, you know what? God is my ability to wake up every day and be proud of what I'm doing, peel my layers back and see my faults, my flaws, and try to do better. My God steps in, and when I'm completely powerless with no ability to manage whatever it is I'm trying to manage, because that's my inability to let go of my will and my control to just say, hey, I ain't got this crap today. Just take care of me. Whatever it is you expect out of me today, just make it happen. And so, what Carl shared about spirituality and that spiritual connection. And then, Andy's just like, hey, just do what it says and like follow along and find your way, because your way is what matters. At the end of the day, what works for you might not work exactly for somebody else. But it's, if you follow what those words say and you do your steps and you listen to the people in the rooms that have got the fucking clean time and sobriety time, you're gonna find your way, and you're gonna have good people around you to help you get there when you got the questions.
Yeah, it's that old prayer, that they say in the morning is, today, God, I might be so busy that I might forget about you today, but please don't forget about me. So the idea that, these are all good things, and I appreciate everybody sharing this stuff. Is there anybody else on here that has a question, that wants to pop in with a question? Jeff, do we have anybody else? I see Malin, she says our audio went out. Can't hear anyone. Okay, we could talk about Malin. She can't hear us. Yeah. So I'll tell you something interesting is we talked about going to Scotland years and years ago, but even before that, I went to England, to London, probably about 32 or 33 years ago, and they had 2 or 3 meetings there at the time. Now they have like 1,000 meetings there. They've got so many meetings there. But one thing is, they didn't talk about God. And we did a convention there in Brighton, England. I don't remember what year it was. It was a long time ago. But after that, they just sprung up with meetings all over the place. And now they talk about God there. So that's a cool thing. God is definitely part of this program, a huge part of this program. You can't continue to grow spiritually without God. No. Jerry, Janine, you got anything you want to jump in with?
Well, I like what you said about you don't understand God, but you have an understanding of God.
That works for me. Yeah.
Yes. So, it just seems like when I allow myself to be open-minded and believe in this higher power, which I choose to call God, I have a desire to do the next right thing and not think less of myself, but think of myself less and care more about my fellow man. You know, I've learned in AA that we're all children of God and we all have a right to be here. And I like that. I didn't grow up really with those concepts. And so the magic happens in AA somewhere in the middle of those steps where I started caring more about other people than myself. And so I see that as being God working in my life.
You want to add anything? We're gonna quit in a few minutes. You want to add anything?
I think that this has been a fabulous podcast. Thanks for having us on here today, Danny. Thanks for talking about really hard to talk about concept. I was, in my own spirituality, I looked to my sponsor. I looked to a lot of different things to continue to seek God and to seek sobriety. I think, they're both, if we're resting on our laurels, we're probably going backwards. So it's always a program of action. What do you call it? A&A, something in action, but attitude and action. And even, just thinking about the definition for a guru, right? So a spiritual leader, gu is like darkness and ru is dispeller. And then the dispeller of darkness, and just trying to live more in the light of recovery, to be able to be of service to other people. Like Jerry said, thinking of other people. Our 12th step encourages us to carry the message to other alcoholics and people that are suffering. And there is a lot of suffering in the world. And so we have an opportunity with these 12 steps that have been given to us to really make a difference. I'm reading a book right now about Lois and Bill. It's called A Marriage That Changed the World. And it's really a great book. And I know, Danny, you're a proficient author and have so many great books, both fiction and nonfiction, available, and even mini series to hear about how you're dispelling darkness in the world and really bringing light. And so thank you for doing that. And it's just a real honor and privilege to get to be here with all of you. And thank you, Jeff, for being such a fabulous producer.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to thank everybody that joined in today. My old friend Carl from Scotland and all the other guys that joined on. Please pass this podcast around. Let people know, because we don't charge anybody. We don't pass the basket. It's free. And we're trying to answer questions that people have in sobriety to help each other. And that's what the main purpose of this podcast is. Nobody's looking to make money here or get rich, but we want to have as many people as possible. If we can't build up an audience, we're not going to be able to, keep this thing alive. So each week I'll have somebody else on with me, and then we'll give each person that's joined us a minute or two to ask a question and talk. But I do appreciate everybody that joined in today. And thank you guys for being here. And my guests today, Jerry and Janine and Carl, thank you guys. Jeff, anything else?
That's it. That's a wrap.
All right, guys. Take care. We'll see you next week. Every Saturday, 11 Central Time, 5 p.m. in England, Ireland, Scotland. All right, guys. Take care. Now.
Okay.